Hello, welcome to the 53rd installment of the ChessTDD series. In this one I am fresh off a satisfying refactoring and ready to move on to the next phase of this digression into the castling implementation, which is to start implementing castling with the black pieces. And with hindsight being 2020, having already coded this, one of the main takeaways that I'd offer is that it gets a lot easier to build on a good foundation. So there was a lot of back and forth and thinking this through, and then some refactoring, and the question will often come up: is the refactoring in the end worth it? And I think here you get a good look at yes. So I did a 15-minute digression in the last episode, which was basically just refactoring this class and making it cleaner. And now you'll get to see what I do here for the black pieces, which takes about 15 minutes, I guess. And I don't remember off the top if it was 2 episodes to do the initial foray into this, but I think for a while I was trying to inline it with board and everything. So the refactoring makes my effort here more efficient. And it's even more noticeable, I would say, because, or it's even more pronounced because I'm going back and, as is always the case, you hear me say like a broken record, I haven't looked at this code in a while. So coming in after, a week or 2 or whatever it's been, the refactoring was a big help. So life was good here at the end of this episode. But let's stay in the here and now for a moment. So one thing you're seeing me do here is I'm getting to the red state via not compiling, and I'm okay with having it not compile because I don't have this constant yet. I have a good pattern for this, so I feel comfortable about just declaring it in there rather than the initial step of maybe actually just writing the board coordinate with the magic numbers. Your mileage may vary on that. I wouldn't feel great about it if it were the first thing I were doing, if none of those existing constants were there. But since there's already a pattern for it, it's not... The thing you want to, I think, avoid is kind of like premature design and optimization, but this isn't really premature. There's a well-worn path to value there. But again, your mileage may vary, and I think that's sufficiently nuanced that it's really hard to say in any authoritative way. So what you've seen me do here is I'm using NCrunch to show my path through here, and since I hadn't looked at this code in a bit, I was kind of trying to figure out, okay, where am I going wrong? Let me just follow the red dots to the place where I'm having the problem. And I don't remember off the top what it was. I would have had a good look at it there, but let's see. I think I figured out, I remember the problem was stupid. I believe, and what you're seeing me do there, I don't think I'm refactoring while red, even though it may look that way. I think the trouble that I was getting around to figuring out was that I was doing the wrong thing here, and this turned out to be one of those facepalm moments. If you'll notice, yeah, I've got 3 rooks there in the last row, so that was the actual problem. So normally I'd slap myself on the back of the hand with a ruler for refactoring while red, but I don't think that was my goal. I think I had smelled something fishy about the setup and was trying to figure that out. You will also see this come up again where I have to stop myself from doing a very simple refactoring when I notice I've spelled something wrong. Okay, so now I was probably momentarily puzzled by the black show of non-coverage before I realized that I needed to click in the bottom right to return to normal, and all is right in the world again. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm putting these tests up at the top just so I can have quick access to my board setup, and I'm trying to duplicate everything that I was doing with the white pieces. Except, check that, I shouldn't say everything. I'm trying to duplicate just enough of these test cases to tease out the implementation. Because one thing to bear in mind It's late in the game, but in terms of this series, and it's sort of a basic lesson with TDD. But the goal when using tests to drive your implementation is not to exhaustively cover your cover all possible scenarios that might be inputs to the system. You want to write enough tests to drive the implementation you need. And, you can write more tests than that, but you're not test driving anymore when you're doing that. You're adding additional regression tests. That might just be typical unit test. If I have some cases in here that I've covered and then the design is finished and I just want to be more complete with what I'm testing, I'll say two things to that. Number one, that is just kind of standard test after unit testing, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that approach. But number two, I'll say that be careful when you do that you're not, I guess I'll call it, cluttering the code base with unnecessary unit tests. If you have teased out your entire implementation, driving it with acceptance and unit tests, you may want to consider, for any given test, is there a point where you're hitting diminishing returns? Are you making the code base too brittle at the expense of, or for the trade-off of not getting a ton of value? So to illustrate what I'm talking about, think about maybe the simplest kind of TDD you could do where you were using a few test cases to drive a method that added two integers. And, I don't know, maybe that took you like 2 unit tests to write to test drive it, and then you're returning x plus y. How much value is there into then writing unit tests that tests x plus y for every combination of integers less than 100? That's going to give you 10,000 tests, and I don't know that you're adding much value when you do that. And then later, if you want to change that method, that's a whole lot of stuff to go back and modify. And anyway, so I'm listing a very extreme case there just to illustrate the idea. That is obviously extreme. And please do not come away from this saying that I'm telling you that writing any test after you're done test driving is that obtuse. It's certainly not. There is value to covering it with corner cases, or maybe there's explicit business cases that you want to have demonstrated in the code. It's like everything in software development, it's a matter of trade-offs. So back to the task at hand here. What I figured out to do pretty quickly was I have this set of tests that work and a production implementation that works. And I'm just going to kind of obtusely say, all right, so I had written all these for the white pieces starting in row 1. So let me just check for row 1 and keep doing everything I was doing. And then all of this new stuff, except for the unmoved king thing, all of the new stuff is going to go into this else condition. In my experience, that tends to be a really good way to start figuring out how to make your code handle multiple cases. And that may seem counterintuitive because really you're probably thinking, as soon as you see the code, you're like, there's got to be a way I can introduce a parameter. Your brain starts going in that direction. And I'm sure you've seen me attempt this a number of times. And what I find happens is that you get too clever for yourself. And at least for me, when I look at and see the actual duplication, I have an easier time kind of pattern matching and seeing where I can get it out of there, as opposed to just having the one set of production code and then trying to do the right magical thing to it. So I guess the lesson I'd take away from that is don't be afraid to write code that looks a little redundant or obtuse. If you know you're going to come back and refactor it, if you have the discipline, it can be good to kind of look at the procedural feeling conditionals or loops or whatever it takes. Get it right. What's the expression I've heard? Make it work, make it right, make it fast, or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, get your test passing. It's the fundamental principles here. Get your test passing and then clean it up. But I guess what I'm saying here is don't be afraid to be a little obtuse in order to get your test passing. You're seeing me do it here, putting in this sort of clumsy logic and figuring that I'll fix it later. By all means, feel free, especially if it helps you kind of pattern match and recognize and feel good about what you're looking at in terms of the code. So now I'm scrolling down through, and I think you're kind of watching the unfortunate byproduct of me wanting to replicate what's going on in these tests without actually copying and pasting. Basically, I need to, let's see, I need to tease out a case that's different than these first two. So I think I want to get a case where, so I want to get the count is right, that I'm returning 2 moves. Then I want to just test that one of the moves I expect to exist when nothing's moved is there. Now I want to get at the case where, okay, we're gonna move one of these rooks. So what I'm expecting is that now I'm only going to get this one particular castling move when I inquire about the black king. Also, in this little string of video here around this, I guess, 11-minute mark that I'm at, I think I outsmarted myself a bit with trying to figure out whether I was actually right about the queen and king side. So you might see a bit of like extra scrolling, and you can probably imagine me head scratching. So this took a little longer than it did because I had this digression where I was worried that I was transposing the board from right to left. It turned out I wasn't, or maybe in a crazy plot twist I was, and I still don't realize it. But I came to be of the opinion that I was not actually wrong. It was a little confusing because I'm writing a test about the queen's rook, and in order to test that move is available, I actually have to go and move the king's, or vice versa. You get it. It's confusing. It all gets straightened out in the end. Now, an interesting thing that I'm doing here is once I actually kind of stop transposing things and get myself together, I may only need 3 tests of the black pieces in order to tease out the whole implementation. And that's the kind of thing that you might expect, frankly. If a lot of the basic core logic was already done for the white, then implementing the black, which is similar, just on a different place in the board, you might expect that you don't need to write as many unit tests to get yourself into a place where the simplest way to get it work is to get it to work is to reappropriate that logic. That's pretty common. So if you're implementing something similar, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if you're implementing something that seems very 50-50 on the surface, but actually behind the scenes you have to set up and do a bunch of things that may be common, then maybe to get the first 50% going, you write 10 unit tests, and the second 50% you only need like 2 or 3, because figuring out the right way to parameterize your logic only takes 2 or 3 tests, and then you can feel good about it. You don't need to be a collector, and what I mean by that is you don't need to be like set completeness focused. If you've written 10 tests for white, that does not mean that you need to write 10 tests for black. You need to write as many tests as you need to write to get it working for all the cases that you have requirements for, in essence. Acceptance test cards, however it's coming to you, write enough tests to prove that you're doing everything you're being asked to by your constituents. In this case, I have no constituents, so it's kind of weird, but I'm doing everything I need to in order to play a chess game, in the acceptance tests and not notice that I've got any incorrectness. So that doesn't mean that I need to, in this particular class, set up every possible situation going into castling. If I am reasonably confident that I've nailed it for both sides, I can go back to writing my acceptance tests. All right, so now I am getting to the point where it's time to stop being obtuse, and I think, let's see, I started out being dumb here, I want to say. Oh, I think I wanted to see if I could get all the tests to pass by just doing one of these. I don't know why I would have thought that would work. So I go back and see, well, I no longer have 2 moves. Well, maybe I'm being too hard on myself. It's a lot easier when you're watching. or when you did it earlier this evening. So, oh right, I need 2 of these things. So let's just go ahead and make the mirror implementation here. So if you're looking at this now, you start to, I guess, maybe see what I saw, which is that we're writing, not only is this like nearly identical code, but really it's just a question of what row this is in. So how would we maybe do it where we just pass in a parameter that is the row and that's it? And so what I'm sort of conflicted with and playing around with at this point, and you'll see me take a brief foray into it, I don't leave this done, I guess I'll say it that way. I kind of hate that expression, but I leave this working for all cases at the end of this episode, but at least as far as I know, but I don't leave it as awesome as I might hope. And the reason is because I've put all this effort into defining the specific coordinates with respect to, where on the board these pieces are. But really, when I think about it, especially because of the mirror image of the white and black pieces, I should probably just be defining which columns they're in. Left-hand rook column, right-hand rook column, left-hand castle, right-hand castle, and king. Because that is, let's see if I can do this off the top of my head, 1, 3, 5, 7, 8. So I'm defining all these coordinates, but I'm not actually interested in the coordinates. And I guess theoretically, you could have this castling paradigm in, row 5, if that's where you initially put the white pieces or whatever. I don't know that we have any use case at all for such a thing, but if we did, it would be possible. So what I start to do here is think about, let's write maybe a method where all we take in is the row number. And then if we parameterize this right in get castling moves for, we'll just make a call with 1 and then a call with 8 and return, whichever one of those is determined by the move start. So then actually it's probably just, move start dot y. All this transposition stuff is really killing me, but you get the idea. So you only really care about the part of the move start that defines what row it's in, and then castling per se is defined by the presence and status of pieces at certain columns. So we are almost 20 minutes, 18 something in. I got a few more minutes here. I do not solve all of the world's problems in this episode, as I've mentioned, but that sets up fairly well for next time. And I think that next time around, it's just going to be a question of doing a little bit of cleanup here and then integrating this thing back in with board. And maybe getting rid of all this castling stuff that I'd started to bake into the piece classes. So here's what I'm doing. I'm just essentially replicating the logic from this if and the else. And so at the core, that's what I'm doing. I've got all the tests passing by essentially having this heavily duplicated code, and I want to get rid of that anyway. But it's complicated a little bit by the fact that I've been reasoning this whole time in terms of coordinates rather than rows. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go through the whole thing here and say, let's completely duplicate that and then figure out how to call this. So I'm going to define a new clause here and say that I want to return whatever this method is going to be called. And at first I was kind of union happy. Then I realized, it took me a minute to figure out why, but of course I don't want to remember, because I had forgotten about this design maybe a little bit. We're passing in a specific coordinate for the king. Like, here's where the king is. So when I pass in the white king, I don't want to get back all the castling moves for the white king and the black king. So really what I want to do is have a ternary kind of situation here where I'm saying, well, okay, so if the move start is the king for row 1, then let's return 1. That's a good name for a method that you'll definitely remember to refactor. So this took me an embarrassingly long amount of time. I don't even remember what I was thinking about exactly. Can't be that much longer because the episode's over in like 2 minutes. But yeah, sooner or later I figure it out. And I think I'm looking at those a little bit balefully, realizing that I had made, not a great design decision up front there by defining them in terms of coordinates. But hey, that's the kind of thing that's going to happen to you. That's why you guard with all these tests. That's why you keep your code factored and flexible, is so you can have realizations like, oh, maybe this wasn't, the optimal design. How would I have really known that until I got in and started to, see what this thing looked like? If change is really difficult and expensive, that's when your code gets calcified. And then that triggers you wanting to sort of pre-optimize and vow to always have your design be exactly right up front next time. It never works. There will be people who tell you that they're master architects that figure out exactly what works up front, and far be it from me to channel everybody on Earth's experience, but I've never actually witnessed anyone doing that. I've witnessed people saying they've done it, but, this is not easy stuff that we're doing. So the best thing you can do is assume that you're going to get things wrong and make it not expensive when you do get them wrong. So anyway, that's about it here. This was a point where I said, let's go square things in Trello. We got black castling implemented in this castling evaluation class. Not sure what I was standing here looking at for so long, but that was it. I called it a day, and then I think went over here to just commit the source code and send it on up to GitHub. And that's it. Tune in next time for the conclusion of this class, and then hopefully moving on a little bit.